Oh, one book I do want to read is another one by Brom, who did Slewfoot. He did Krampus.
Ooh.
I want to read it.
Who's Brom?
Brom. He's an author.
He's cool. He can go by his last name.
Is that a villain in Batman?
Kind of sounds like it.
Okay. Hello, Wanderers. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Jess.
And this is Wicked Wanderings. Happy New Year, Wanderers!
Woohoo! Cheers to 2024.
I'm hoping that it's a good one and a healthy one and an accomplished one for all of you.
Everybody, yes.
And that you keep listening to Wicked Wanderings.
Because we're amazing.
We're hoping some things are coming to fruition. Hint, hint. This year.
Yes. Keeping my fingers and legs crossed.
You should keep your legs crossed, you little slut. This will be the last episode for mental health.
Oh.
For now.
Okay.
I wanted to highlight what life was like during the earlier times for individuals getting serviced and to show how far we have come, but also how far we still need to go.
Yes.
As Nellie Bly showed us, much progress needs to be made, but we need to learn from our past in order to approach our future. So trigger warning for this episode because we go deep and there's a lot of...
That's what she said.
There's a lot of gruesome things. The 1930s were influenced by eugenics and how mental health professionals treated patients. This was an era for procedures like insulin coma, metrazole convulsive therapy, electroshock, and prefrontal lobotomy.
Oh my God.
Methods were upgraded so that water therapy would look more appealing, but patients would be lowered into baths of either scalding hot water or ice cold water, and they would not be able to move for sometimes months.
Why?
Because they're dicks.
I'm just wondering, I wonder what they'll do, how they'll react to scalding hot water. Bitch, they'll get burned.
Yeah, they'll get burned, but it's like the reasoning the doctors were giving was we'll take their mind off of what's going on in their heads. Like anybody, but
it's gonna
that's not
traumatize them more.
Exactly. They also used a jet shower where the pressure of the water was increased up to 40 pounds and as cold as 50 degrees. Which all I can think of is when firefighters use water and how high of a pressure that is.
Yeah.
A doctor said they met resistance by patients with this one. No shit. Gynecologists were removing uteruses and ovaries as a way to cure women patients. If a woman was said to masturbate too much, the clitoris would be removed.
But that's why God put it there, for women's pleasure. She should get pleasure from it.
This is some handmade shit. Was it that show I'm thinking of?
Handmaid's Tale.
Handmaid's Tale, thank you.
Oh, I watched the first season, but I can't stand her face.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's her face. I can't watch it.
I know.
It's just stuck with her.
She's kind of like the girl from Twilight, one expression.
Yeah, exactly.
But I still love Twilight.
Her facial expressions are just flat.
You should really get back into it and watch the whole thing because it's really good as you get into the seasons.
The thing is that drives me nuts about this, when they're talking about taking this away from women because they use it too much, why us? Mm-hmm. Women are allowed to experience pleasure too. Yeah. Like you said, that's why God put it there.
It's the only organ that is designed specifically for pleasure.
Exactly. So
I don't even know if it's an organ, but part of my body.
Exactly. Unlike the asylums in the 1800s where discharge rates were high, the 1930s were seeing less and less discharged patients. It seems that instead of approaching these people with kindness and understanding, these so-called doctors were looking for a quick fix through mutilating the bodies.
Okay, question. When women get hysterectomies, they have to go on medication to control their hormones. So when you remove the uterus, it does not fix that problem. Sometimes it makes it worse.
Yep. And I didn't read anything about them trying to regulate that at all.
They probably didn't. They didn't know.
The insulin coma that became popular was doctors injecting patients with insulin that would cause a fit, and then they would be in a coma for up to 2 hours.
Okay. Apparently, there is this case that I watched on some crime show where this woman killed her husband with an insulin overdose. And if you give them insulin and they sit and fester for 2 or 3 days, they can't tell what their cause of death was.
Interesting.
So these people could have killed people. Anyway, just in case. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Rob. Don't look at me that way. But crazy, because they could have OD'd these clients, these patients on insulin.
Absolutely.
And, oops, they died. I wonder how.
So after the 2 hours or thereabouts, they would then give them a glucose mixture that would help them wake. So because these patients were not in need of insulin, right, it damaged the brain, causing them to be childlike and subdued.
Oh my God.
The effects would not last forever, and so the procedure would be re-administered until the effects were prolonged.
Why?
So a lot of these procedures that I'm going to talk about, they made them childlike to the point where they were able to be managed. And that's what these people want. Like, oh, they're fixed. Like, look at them.
You can control
psychos.
them.
Yep. It became less havoc for the nurses or the aides to have to deal with at night or even during the day. It's sickening. Metrazole convulsive therapy was cheaper than the insulin coma and did not require as many staff members. The convulsions caused by the injections could cause breakage of bones and spine because they were so violent.
Wow.
The patients would come to be childlike again and engaging in odd behavior. This treatment would have to be re-administered like the insulin coma therapy, but patients were scared of it and frightened to do it again. Obviously. The doctors were using fear as a way for the patients to behave. The book Mad in America by Robert Whitaker, which I do recommend because it's very informative, tells a story of a 17-year-old girl in 1959 who was put into asylum by her parents because she ran off with a 22-year-old who she called her boyfriend. Her parents were also upset because they believe a previous boyfriend was gay. Like, who cares? Right? But this is also the 50s. Not as progressive, obviously. Because of these incidents, they put her in for electric shock therapy. After several attempts, the doctors were not happy with the results. So what do? They kept going.
They raised it.
So they kept going with the treatment until the girl walked around naked, soiled herself, and had no recollection of who the boyfriend was. Is this really how you wanted your daughter to be? Like, now she has no idea who this boyfriend is, right? Which is what they wanted. But now she can't even go to the bathroom by herself.
Yeah, she's shitting her pants.
Like, you call this progress?
Sorry, but I'd rather have my daughter run off with a 22-year-old.
Right?
Actually, not even run off. Like, welcome to the family.
Right.
Scare him off with commitment. Just kidding. Anyway.
Electroshock therapy was also being used on a group of children ages 4 to 11. This group of children were given 2 shocks a day over 20 days. The outcomes were not all great, causing one child to go after the doctors and one trying to commit suicide. Ugh. Patients were given this treatment without their consent, and if they gave consent, it was usually because the doctors told them it would not hurt.
Of course.
Patients were choked until they passed out, strapped down, and when they came to, the procedure began.
I mean, who doesn't like to be choked and strapped down?
Jess, that's another episode.
I'm just kidding. This is your fault, Anna. Anyway, seriousness. Sorry. I apologize to our wanderers out there.
The doctors thought it was better they were not allowed to know what would happen so as not to scare them. It was also admitted that doctors used it as punishment, not as a cure. Doctors would use it as mental spanking for women, or saying they would up the dose for those patients they did not like.
I would misbehave just to be spanked. I'm sorry.
Jessica!
Anyway.
Let's talk about Jess's favorite part right now, though.
Ooh, what is it?
Frontal lobotomies!
Yay!
Lobotomies were not new to the 20th century, but as early as the 12th century, physicians would cut holes into people's heads, hoping the demons would leave their bodies so they would be better.
Oh my God.
So, Jess, do you know about Phineas Gage?
Yes, I do.
So, for all those wanderers that don't know about him, Phineas was a railroad worker that had a spike go through his cheek and out through his brain, causing damage to his frontal lobe. He is mentioned in Whitaker's book because he was such a phenomenon, but also because he was science showing that damage to that part of the brain causes a change to mood.
Yeah, and he survived it.
He
for
did.
One.
Yeah, 7 extra years, I think it was. The published research was showing such high success rates, but were these accurate? After having the procedure, families were told what to expect, and it was not pleasant. You would expect the patient not to leave their bed, not even to go to the bathroom. Make sure they are turned so they do not get bed sores. They will grunt in response to questions. If they do get to the bathroom, it would take up to an hour for them to finish because they just sit there. Bathing will need to be assisted because they will play with the water and not actually wash. You will have to reteach manners because they steal food from other people's plates, and insulting them would only cause them to smile. Some are able to have a job, but it must be something at a simple level. Doing chores and housekeeping will be too difficult because they cannot multitask. Sex drive will also be changed.
How so?
Oh, well, let me tell you. Sex was another Waterloo. The lobotomized male, Freeman and Watts explained, might begin to paw his wife at inconvenient times and under circumstances when she may be embarrassed, and sometimes it develops into a ticklish situation. His lovemaking was also apt to be at a somewhat immature level in that the patient seeks sexual gratification without particularly thinking how to plan a procedure.
I think my husband's had a frontal lobotomy.
It was up to the woman to learn to enjoy such deficiencies.
Of course.
Right. Refusal of sex has led to one savage beating that we know of and to several separations. Physical self-defense is probably the best tactic for the woman. Her husband may have regressed to the caveman level, and she owes it to him to be responsive at the cavewoman level. It may not be agreeable at first, but she will soon find it exhilarating if unconventional. So ladies, if your husband has had a frontal lobotomy, it is your job to still make him have pleasure.
Of course.
Don't mind your pleasure, but...
Well, if they cut off her clitoris, then what does she got?
Seriously, right? The research articles were not accurately depicting the results. Lobotomy was causing more harm than good.
No shit.
Lobotomy was not surgery of the soul. This was surgery that removed the soul. As one critic said, lobotomy was a partial euthanasia. But the trial results published in the medical journals never captured the sense of profound loss. The journal articles conveyed a different reality, telling in general of an operation that could transform hopelessly lost patients on backwards into happy people, some of whom were working and leading fulfilling social lives. The question that arises today is what drove the creation of that different reality? Why did those who performed the surgery in the late 1930s and early 1940s see their patients' outcomes through such a rosy lens? For that is clearly what they saw. They perceived this surgery as one that could offer great benefits to the mentally ill.
But how?
Right.
Especially for their families. They have to take even more care of them.
Exactly. Exactly my point. The Rockefellers, here we go again with the Rockefellers, were donating millions of dollars to make sure psychiatry was being pushed into the future, and so the doctors were feeling the pressure to keep the money flowing. Lobotomies were also a way for the state hospitals to save money in the long run. They calculated how many patients would make good candidates. Then they calculated the percentage of how many would be able to go home and how many would die from the procedure. With that calculation came the money that the hospitals would save in the long run, which is sickening.
So it's
sick.
a business. It's money.
Yep.
It's all about money, like everything else.
Exactly. Walter Freeman. Do you know about Walter Freeman?
No.
Okay. Lore with Aaron Mahnke.
Mm-hmm.
Love you, Aaron Mahnke.
Love you, Aaron Mahnke.
He does an episode on Walter Freeman, and I've been fascinated since. So Walter Freeman then began transorbital lobotomies, where he would enter through the patient's eye sockets and not have to open the brain. So Freeman performed his first transorbital lobotomy in 1946. Patients would be given a series of shocks to put them out, and then Freeman would enter an ice pick into their eye socket, insert about 7 centimeters down, and pull it out to scramble the brain. The procedure would take about 20 minutes, and the patients would be done in a couple hours. The family was told to bring sunglasses for the patient to cover their black eyes. And with that, we're going to take a nice break. Think about those transorbital lobotomies, people.
A sincere expression of gratitude to our esteemed patrons, Lynn from Massachusetts, Heather from New Jersey, Courtney from Massachusetts, Amber from Idaho, and Chelsea from Utah, for their generous monthly contributions. Their support fuels the engine of our investigative endeavors here at Wicked Wanderings.
You too can become a valued patron and unlock a realm of exclusive content by supporting our mission for as little as $3 a month. Your contribution sustains our commitment to delivering high-quality content.
Visit wickedwanderingspodcast.com and click on the support tab to join the ranks of dedicated patrons like Lynn, Heather, Amber, Courtney, and Chelsea. Your investment not only keeps our podcast thriving, but also ensures you are at the forefront of intriguing discoveries.
Thank you for considering this opportunity to deepen your engagement with Wicked Wanderings. Your support is paramount in enabling us to continue our journey into the realms of mystery and true crime. And now back to the shit show. You have Amazon, right?
Yes.
Amazon Prime.
Yes.
Have you watched Lore?
No, I should, because I love Aaron Mahnke.
So do the Walter Freeman episode. It's so good.
And after you watch that, I highly recommend the Robert episode.
Oh my
Is that
gosh,
the
Robert the doll.
Yes.
I love Robert the doll.
It's creepy.
It's
You know what?
so creepy. I would love to go and see Robert the doll.
From a distance.
It's what, California, right?
Florida,
Well, it's
I
behind.
Oh.
It's behind a glass
Yes,
case.
but you can't take a picture of him.
Right.
Because people that take a picture of him end up like having weird shit happen to them. So
Nope. I will look at it through binoculars.
Freeman took his show on the road and started visiting asylums where he would review records and choose his victims. By the way, just letting you wanderers know, if you watch Aaron Mahnke's Lore on Amazon Prime, he has an episode about Walter Freeman and it is fabulous. You're welcome, Aaron Mahnke. Love you mucho. Okay. He would charge as little as $25 a patient, and he was completing procedures as fast as 10 minutes. To go faster, he would insert an ice pick in each eye and pull up at the same time, scrambling both parts of the brain. He would teach the doctors and psychiatrists at the asylum how to do this procedure. The scary part was when I was reading Man in America by Robert Whitaker, is that it sounds like he wasn't just teaching the people that had degrees. He was teaching staff to do this procedure, and it was very scary.
Oh.
Yeah. So
This sounds vaguely familiar, but
Walter Freeman, very fascinating. I'm fascinated by Walter Freeman. Following World War II, pharmaceutical drugs were beginning to arrive. Pharmaceutical companies would begin popping up, and this became a new way for the asylums to deal with patients. The pharmaceutical companies did not have to prove to the FDA that the drug worked, just that it was not toxic to take. And with patent laws, competition was removed and prices would soar. I mean, that to me just sounds normal, that pricing of pharmaceuticals would soar, right? Hasn't changed.
nope.
Having patients be calm and childlike let them receive better care due to staffing liking the demeanor. They would show more kindness and compassion when tranquil. Before certain laws, drugs could be picked up over the counter. It was not necessary for you to go to the doctor to get a prescription. Pharmaceutical advertisement were less than honest and not telling you straight what the drug would do. Because, you know, we have these annoying commercials now that's like, by the way, and they list off like all the, they didn't have to do that. Pharmaceutics wanted to get chlorpromazine?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Was seen like a drug lobotomy, but they won't say that to the public. Instead, it is a drug to calm your nerves and let you see life through new eyes. During the mid-20th century, this was a turning point for mental health. But was it? The wants of the mentally ill were still not being heard. All society saw and wanted was a way to take the strain off the system quickly so that these people could be added back to society with little to no effort. The author of Man in America does focus often on schizophrenia, and while discussing the drug market, he wrote something interesting about how the public perceives schizophrenia. The image we have today of schizophrenia is not that of madness, whatever that might be, in its natural state. All the traits that we have come to associate with schizophrenia: the awkward gait, the jerking arm movements, the vacant facial expression, the sleepiness, the lack of initiative, are symptoms due, at least in large part, to a drug-induced deficiency in dopamine transmission. Even behavior that seems contrary to that slothful image, such as the agitated pacing seen in some people with schizophrenia, often arises from neuroleptics. Our perceptions of how those ill with schizophrenia think, behave, and look are all perceptions of people altered by medication, and not by any natural course of a disease. I thought that was interesting, because when you think schizophrenic, those symptoms that he mentioned, that's what you think of. But come to find out, it's really just the drugs causing it.
Well,
Am I losing you?
No, I was just thinking, I'm like, when I think of schizophrenia, I think of like Beautiful Mind and voices and hallucinations.
I've never seen Beautiful Mind.
What?
Yes, I have not seen the Beautiful Mind.
It's interesting.
I'm
And
not,
the paranoia.
not trying to make fun of German people. I don't know where that came from.
I just said, what?
I know, I took
So I
it
don't
off. Schizophrenia was a diagnosis to hand out. To prove incompetency, a psychology professor, David Rosenhan, and 7 others went to different asylums claiming to hear voices, but acted normal otherwise. All were admitted for their symptoms, and all but one were diagnosed with schizophrenia. The patients were the ones that picked up on the charade, saying they were professors because they were writing things down. Rosenhan then ran this experiment in reverse. He told a hospital that he would send a fake patient into the facility in the next 90 days. Out of 193 admitted, 43 were accused of being Rosenhan's patient. But guess what?
He didn't send anybody.
Rosenhan never sent one.
I knew it.
This all proved that the diagnosing was hogwash.
So, to pause for just a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd imagine things happen like that more often than we realize now. Like the misdiagnosing, the sticking with a specific symptom, and like multiple diagnoses. Like we were talking about it in class where people who have substance use also get diagnosed as bipolar because they show in the moment of crisis, you know, the highs and the lows when it's actually, you know, withdrawals from the substance. And then they have that diagnosis on them for in their file.
Right.
And it's like whatever the therapist is thinking that day sometimes, like unqualified. And yeah. Anyway.
I don't really talk about it, but in the last part of this book, there's a lot of talk about schizophrenia because that's what Whitaker really wants to focus on, schizophrenia. I feel like he has a strong tie to schizophrenia. But what I find very interesting is that when you think of medications being given out to people, you're like, oh, they have a low dopamine level, or this brainwave isn't high enough. He's saying the research isn't good enough to prove that. And so we're handing out these pills left and right, and we're not sure what it's doing, which is really scary because as someone that has approached their doctor about mental health, it is still a terrifying thing to do because it's so taboo still for our society. We have not normalized this at all.
No.
And it's scary. It's really scary. So we're putting these drugs into our bodies and then we're finding out the science isn't exactly behind it as it should be. So
the science now is what he's saying currently.
Correct. As from 1990 on.
Oh, interesting. And you also wonder, or at least I wonder, like, do doctors get payouts for specific drugs? I know with my own experience, I have had a great experience getting help from the VA. I cannot complain. I know a lot of veterans don't. But I had I'm on anxiety meds, you know, PTSD and all that kind of fun stuff. And I told the person that I don't feel like it was working. And so they were going to, instead of switching to something else, they were going to add another thing on top of it. And I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that, and you see kids, I'm sure you've seen it, and you're come in with a cocktail of medications, which is super sad.
Right. And then they have to put these kids into a hospital if they want to, like, all right, we need to figure out what is causing this one thing. And they literally have to drain the child from all these medications. Right. And because these kids get PRNs and it's really scary. You know, I'll be honest, too, as someone that is on an anti-anxiety, anti-depression medication, after reading this, it's actually really scary because while I think the medication has helped me, it's scary, right? It's the unknown of what it's actually doing to your body. So, but you can kind of understand why parents are so hesitant to medicate their child. I think there is so much that we don't know about mental health and how things work. So I'm going to actually get into a story of a woman that was kind of put into a trial without actually knowing about it. So I'll get to some of that. Mental health is still taboo. We need to make it non-taboo because I know it's still taboo because when talking to my doctor, I was afraid he was not going to believe me. And in my doctor's defense, he did believe me, right?
That's good.
He did. He asked me some questions, which he should. But it was still nerve-wracking because it's something that you cannot see. Right? It's not like I have a broken leg. Yeah, I can see from your x-ray you have a broken leg, but it's something that's mental. So I don't think anyone has a perfect brain. I just don't think that exists.
What?
Okay.
I think your brain is perfect, Hannah.
Oh, shucks, honey. I think yours is perfect.
Thanks.
The author also points out that the high diagnosis rate for poor and African-American people So once slavery was abolished, African Americans then had to worry about being put into insane asylums, which I did not know about. White people would say that Black people did not know how to be free. It was not good for them because of violence and cannibalistic ancestry they came from, which we all know is bullshit. Slavery was good for them, they said, and they were better off. These poor people were finally free and now had to worry about another form of capture by the medical system. I wrote on the page of the book, I wrote bunch of douche canoes. Literally. Like, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. These people are finally free. And now they're being shoved into asylums. Ugh. I know. It's, oh my God. But you know what? If we do not know about our history, we cannot learn from our history, right?
Good point.
So I hope we're learning. Shoving drugs at people to fix the problem was becoming the problem. Doctors were proclaiming victory while patients wanted to climb out of their skin. Suicide was becoming prevalent. A 36-year-old Hispanic male went to the hospital because he could not sleep and was overly nervous. He was given an injection of flufenazine.
Sure.
Anyone in the medical field, if you want to fix our pronunciation, let me know. But it was to treat schizophrenia and other psychosis symptoms, and he was sent away. Over the course of several weeks, he would return to the hospital agitated and begging for help. He was in so much misery, but nothing fixed it, so he jumped in front of a subway train. Yep.
Did the medication make it worse?
Yeah. Yep.
You know, when people have problems sleeping, I think like Ambien or, Tylenol PM. Let's just go straight to the schizophrenic medication.
It was hard to read some of these stories. It was just, it was absolutely awful. A few case reports linked akathisia, which, by the way, is a state of agitation, distress, side effects of antipsychotic drugs, to bizarre murders. One 39-year-old white man, after a haloperidol injection, made him feel like he was falling apart, that all the bones in his body were broken. Bludgeoned his mother with a hammer, an act he later found incomprehensible. So he does it, and then he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, right? Another 35-year-old man asked why he had stabbed a grocer he had known for some time, said he did it to get the drug-induced pain out of his head. The only reason I knifed the guy was Haldol messed me up. Proloxin makes me want to kill too. The murderous explosion of a 23-year-old male, detailed in the Journal of Forensic Psychiatry, was perhaps the most chilling example of all. After his wife left him, he became distraught and was brought to an emergency room by the police. He had briefly hospitalized a number of times before, and he warned the staff that he reacted badly to haloperidol. In spite of his protest, he was injected with the drug, and he quickly exploded in rage. He ran from the emergency room, tore off his clothes in a nearby park, and started attacking everyone he saw. Over the course of 45 minutes, he tried to rape a woman walking in the park, broke into a house, and beat an 81-year-old woman to a pulp, fought with a policeman, and then escaped. Stabbed 2 more women and was then at last subdued by a gang of 8 cops.
Holy shit.
In 45 minutes. And he told the people that he could not take this certain medication.
Wow. I mean, I didn't think it would be that extreme. Holy shit, that's crazy.
And there is another part here that several high-profile murders in recent years have been committed by people in this drug withdrawal state. Most recently, Newsweek reported that Andrea Yates, the Houston mother who killed her 5 children, you know this case?
Yes.
Did so after she was taken off the powerful antipsychotic drug Haldol. However, such instances of violent murders are inevitably reported as examples of why the mentally ill need to be kept on medications, rather than as examples of the peril of using the drugs in the first place. The blame is put on the patients and their disease rather than on the medications.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine with antipsychotics, it's similar to SSRIs.
Yeah.
That you have to wean off of them and you can't just go cold turkey. Right. But I have not been to medical school, and so don't quote me on that. But I'd imagine it would be similar, especially when there's stuff that goes on like that.
Right. Right. Exactly. Some points that this Whitaker makes is that there were a lot of studies in the back of this book I didn't completely understand, especially, so I am in the medical field, right? Mm-hmm. But the research that I read is so different than some, like, understanding these medications. Mm-hmm. But I will say that a lot of the stuff that he was talking about was more how patients that were shown kindness and compassion and their illness was dealt with in that way instead of just shoving a medication at them was better in the long run.
I mean, obvious.
Like he refers back to, I know in the first episode of this series that I did, talked about the Quakers and how they approach these people as like, these are my brothers, right? That need help. They need extra kindness. And so I forgot if I talk about it or not in this episode, but there was this house that was developed in the 70s in California where these people that were mentally ill were able to go and just be themselves. So if they needed to break everything in the room, they allowed it. They met them where they were, and there was high success rates, but the drug companies just didn't want to see it.
Well, and that's the basis of trauma-informed care.
Right.
If you look at it simply.
Right.
Is to meet them where they're at. And, I mean, I could go off on this for a while.
No, I know, because it's very near and dear to our heart. And I think that's what makes Wicked Wandering special in this aspect, is because that we're both in mental health care and we see this every day at work.
Yeah.
And how trauma-informed care and trauma-assumed care are so important for the people that we work with, because I think it's so easy for these doctors on their high pedestal, not everyone, but on their high pedestal that can be like, okay, these are the symptoms, this is the medication I give, without looking at the person as a whole picture.
They just check off the boxes or, put them in the same category when people aren't the same, regardless of their diagnosis or experiences.
FDA laws were different in the 60s, so drug companies did not have to write out all symptoms of a drug. Jess, have you ever seen the movie The Ya-Ya Sisterhood?
It's been a while.
Okay, so by the way, it's one of my favorite movies. I love The Ya-Ya Sisterhood. There's this one part of the movie that popped into my head while I was reading this book. The main woman in the story, who's played by Sandra Bullock, is remembering how awful her childhood was, and it flashes back to when she was maybe 7 or 8, and she's protecting her siblings from their mother, who is beating them with a belt. Does this ring a bell at all?
Getting beat with a belt?
Yeah.
No, I got the wooden spoon. I'm just kidding. Continue.
So the other part of the story that she does not know as a 7 or 8 year old is that a doctor had prescribed the mother a drug that should not have been prescribed, and it caused her to be delusional and violent. So when you watch the movie, obviously as a 7, 8 year old, you don't see this, but like her friends and her husband are around her and they're looking at the medication and they're basically saying this doctor should not be in business. He should not be giving this medication because, by the way, this woman, I don't know if you remember, but she lost her one true love to the war, and then she married this man that does love her, but then I think she had some postpartum depression, and this doctor is just prescribing her this drug because it probably fit whatever symptoms she was having, but it was also causing her to be psychotic in her children, which wasn't what she wanted to begin with. So I think it was like a perfect example of what was going on in the 60s and 70s with that. So in the 60s, doctors were finding the patients spitting the pills out and not taking them as they should, which I don't blame them. They believed that the patients did not have rights. So how can a person deemed insane have the mind to decide what is best for them? In this case, the state becomes the guardian and they lose all rights. Because of this act of defiance, drug companies made an injectable medicine and a liquid that could be spilled into their food. It was said that once this starts to happen, patients will be more subdued and willing to take their medication. Patients started having their voice heard and protests started popping up, though. Cases were going to court and being heard by judges.
Good.
The war was between the patients, the pharmaceutical companies, and those that prescribed the medication. The author made a point that stuck with me. Over the course of the 60s to the 80s, 400,000 beds were freed up in insane asylums. Without looking at how history was changing, you could say this was because of antipsychotics. But that's not the case. So during these years, Medicare and Medicaid came to be, as well as Social Security benefits for the disabled. So it wasn't because of meds, but it was because of all these programs that started to come into place. America likes to see herself as the country that is progressive and does nothing wrong. That sets the example for other countries, but it's not entirely true. While the Nazi physicians experimented on the Jewish people to further help their side of the war, American physicians were experimenting to further science on patients in asylums. While the Americans sentenced these Nazi physicians to death because of their inhumane acts, American scientists were not doing any better. So I thought that was an interesting point that Whitaker made was we were putting these physicians that were doing bodily experiments on these people, which is totally wrong, but the physicians here in America, I feel like weren't doing any better.
Yeah. And that shit still goes on in the military.
Really?
Yeah, they try new things with us. I remember my husband telling me that for penicillin, they had a mixture to put in their drink when he went through basic. When I went through, which wasn't long after, I got a shot in the ass for the penicillin. Yeah.
I am so sorry.
Yeah. I've been poked so many times.
That's awful.
Yeah. The worst shot I've ever had was the damn COVID. But before that was anthrax. Anyway, just thought you'd like to know.
Anthrax shot?
Yeah, I've had the anthrax shot to go overseas. And it burns your arm, like your whole arm, but it doesn't last like 5 days like the COVID shot did.
Shit.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm so sorry.
Made me stronger.
Well, thank you for the
Put hair on
sacrifice
my
to your
chest.
country. Like, oh my God. Experiments were being done on patients without consent. Shalma Prince was a woman doing well for herself, attending school and then going to live in New York City. But in 1981, suffered from a manic episode of bipolar. Her doctor put her on lithium and she did well until 2 years later. She felt manic and not quite right, so she went to the hospital because she did not want to relapse. She was approached by a doctor that told her that there was a medical trial occurring that could help her if she would just sign the release. The release was basic with her name and that she was willingly entering the trial to better her health. Prince knew the cost of doctors, so decided it was better to sign it because why would a man in a white coat steer her wrong? The purpose of the experiment was to take her off her lithium for at least a week and then at the end would be given a dopamine releasing agent. She went through withdrawals which caused her to be manic and not sleep, and worse. The dopamine agent was given and it caused her to be worse, where she was strapped to a chair for days where her family could come and gawk at her. She was eventually released with a $15,000 bill for services rendered and having to relearn her life again. It was not until 1994 where she read an article that brought her back to that time where unsuspecting Americans were being experimented on. She brought her case before a judge where he denied her case and said she should have thought of this earlier before the statute of limitation ran out. The defense attorney said she should think of where her life would have been without the experiment and be grateful. Bunch of freaking douches.
Mm-hmm.
The experiments were causing more harm than good. In the 90s, trials were performed for research, but what the research left out was the people that died from the experiments. Suicide was one driving factor of death. In order to get a baseline of these individuals in the study, they have to withdraw their current medications. But they did not slow withdrawal. They just took them away, and that was that. It was faster that way. You understand.
Right.
Sarcasm. Due to this, people rather have chosen hanging, jumping, or shooting a gun into their brain due to the strain in their brains and bodies. We have probably all heard the term drug pushers, and so has this become the new lobotomy or new electric shock therapy where drugs are causing more harm than good. The question I have to end this is the following. What constitutes mad? That's my question to everyone. What constitutes mad? Because after reading this book and working with the population I do, what really constitutes mad? Not that you really have to answer. It can be just something you think about, but that's my question.
Based on those old determinations, like all of us are considered mad.
Right. Exactly. I think that mental health is a thing. Don't get me wrong. But I think that we really have to look at the people through history that would have been considered mad. Like, think about the musicians and the composers that we have through history because of, quote unquote, they were mad, or artists, right? I think of Van Gogh. I think of Beethoven. I think of all these people that had something to add to our society. They weren't necessarily, quote unquote, normal, but they added something.
Yeah. And they were different.
Right.
And as history shows, people who are different from what is considered normal aren't treated very well.
Right.
Fucking Putnams.
Fucking Putnams. Probably related to the damn Putnams. Cocaine.
Cocaine. We need to make some hoodies.
We really do. If anyone wants a hoodie, can you tell us? Because I think we
have ideas.
We do have ideas. But I don't know if we should write cocaine on the back of a hoodie.
No, it needs to say cocaine, like really big. And then underneath say it's not a sedative. And then Jess.
Anyways, thank you, Wanderers, for listening to my nonsense.
Thanks. That was an awesome episode.
If you guys have any suggestions for this new year, please email us at wickedwanderingspodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, or comment on our Instagram account, Wicked Wanderings Podcast. We would just love to hear from you. I'm thinking also that me and Jess are going to start a TikTok.
Yes.
So as soon as we know what our handle is going to be, is it a handle for TikTok? I'm guessing.
I don't know.
I think so.
We will let you know.
TikTok makes me feel old because I don't know how to do the videos.
Dude, seriously. I did not know what the word, oh my God, what was the word? Dupe?
What does that mean?
What's dupe?
That's what I said. So I was talking to someone at work and they're like, yeah, the kid was mad because they called it a dupe. I'm like, what the fuck is a dupe? It just means it's not the real thing. So if you don't have a Stanley Cup that's a real Stanley, it's a dupe.
So it's fake.
It's fake. Exactly. I didn't know.
Why can't
what a
you
dupe
just
was.
say fake?
I don't know.
Don't forget to follow us on Threads and Twitter
That's right.
/X.
We're on Twitter?
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah.
You manage the Twitter, right?
I know.
I don't have Twitter.
The Twitter and the Threads.
Yes.
Anyways,
Awesome.
we love you guys. We hope your new year is awesome.
Yes. Cheers to 2024.
You can find all our social media sites on our website, which is wickedwanderingspodcast.com. It is down below in the show notes.
Thanks,
Love you, mean it.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening today. This show wouldn't be possible without our amazing producer and editor, Rob Fitzpatrick, who works tirelessly behind the scenes to bring you the best content.
And a special thanks to Taiga Soundprod for providing the captivating intro music. Cinematic Intro 24.
And of course, we can't forget the hauntingly beautiful outro music, Rhino's Theme, composed by Kevin MacLeod.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platforms, like Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Your feedback means the world to us.
Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram for behind-the-scenes glimpses, updates, and more thrilling content. You can find us at Wicked Wanderings Podcast.
Thank you so much for listening and being part of our Wicked Wanderings community. We appreciate each and every one of you.
Stay curious,
Keep exploring.
and always remember to keep on wandering.